His day didn't begin with sunlight. It began with a screen. Before his eyes had fully adjusted to morning, before his feet touched the floor, before he had even remembered what day it was, his thumb was already searching for his phone. The room remained silent. No emergency, no urgent message, only a handful of notifications that could easily have waited another hour. Yet he unlocked the screen anyway. Weather, emails, Instagram, messages, news headlines, a short video, another one, then another. 7 minutes disappeared before he even got out of bed. He never noticed them leaving. Like most people, he believed he was simply checking his phone. He never realized his phone was quietly checking him. Every morning followed the same invisible routine. While brushing his teeth, the phone rested beside the sink. While making coffee, it leaned against the kitchen counter playing another video. Waiting for the elevator, he checked it. Standing inside the elevator, he checked it again. Walking through the parking lot, another glance. By the time he reached his car, he had already touched his phone more than a dozen times. None of it felt unusual, because everyone around him did exactly the same thing. At the first red traffic light, every driver lowered their eyes, not toward the road, toward their screens. On the subway, an entire carriage sat together in complete silence, not reading books, not observing the city rushing past the windows, not speaking to one another. Only endless rows of bowed heads illuminated by blue light. The city had become strangely quiet, not because people had nothing to say, because everyone was talking somewhere else. At work, the pattern continued. A notification interrupted an email interrupted a conversation. A message interrupted lunch. A video interrupted concentration. He often wondered why he felt exhausted before the afternoon had even begun. He blamed long hours, deadlines, stress, too much responsibility. The possibility that his attention was constantly being divided never crossed his mind. During meetings, he promised himself he would stay focused. Then the phone vibrated. He didn't even read the message. Simply seeing the screen light up was enough. His attention followed automatically, almost without permission. That evening, he met an old friend for dinner. They hadn't seen each other in months. They laughed, shared stories, ordered food. Everything felt familiar until the silence arrived. Not an awkward silence, just a natural pause between conversations. Within 3 seconds, both reached for their phones. Neither had planned to. Neither had a reason. The movement happened almost automatically. By the time the food arrived, they had checked their screens 6 different times. Later, driving home, he couldn't remember what they had actually talked about. Only fragments. The meal had lasted almost 2 hours. Yet, somehow, neither of them had been fully present for it. The following Saturday, he decided to go for a walk. No destination, no schedule, just fresh air. The city park was unusually peaceful. Children chased one another beneath tall trees. An elderly couple fed birds beside a small lake. Joggers passed quietly along winding paths. For a few minutes, everything felt slower. Then his phone vibrated. Without thinking, he stopped walking, unlocked the screen, read a notification that was important, locked the phone, continued walking. Less than a minute later, he checked it again. Not because it vibrated, because something inside him expected it to. He frowned. That felt strange. He tried an experiment. He slipped the phone into his pocket and decided not to touch it until he reached the other side of the park. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. His hand instinctively reached toward his pocket. He stopped himself. Another minute. The urge returned. His mind quietly invented excuses. Maybe someone texted. Perhaps there's an important email. What if I missed something? Nothing had happened. Yet his attention kept pulling him toward a device that had remained completely silent. As he stood beside the lake, trying not to unlock his phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes, a calm voice spoke beside him. "Is it calling you?" He looked up. An elderly man stood nearby, watching the water instead of the people. The younger man smiled politely. "My phone." The old man nodded. "It hasn't made a sound." The younger man laughed. "I know. Then why do you keep answering it?" The question caught him completely off guard. He looked down at the phone still resting in his hand. He hadn't even realized he was holding it again. The old man continued, "You've looked at that screen 4 times since I arrived. Not once did it ask you to." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved gently across the surface of the lake. Children continued laughing in the distance. Birds drifted quietly across the water. The younger man slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I think it's just a habit." The old man smiled. "Most prisons are." The words lingered in the silence. Then the stranger extended his hand. "My name," he said calmly, "is Friedrich Nietzsche." For the first time that day, the young man forgot to check his phone. The park slowly emptied as evening approached. The laughter of children faded into the distance. The wind carried fallen leaves across the walking path. For the first time in years, the young man stood in complete silence. No scrolling, no notifications, no glowing screen demanding another glance. Yet something felt strangely uncomfortable. His hand kept reaching toward his pocket, almost on its own. Nietzsche noticed. "You still want to check it?" The young man nodded. "I don't even know why." The philosopher smiled gently. "That is precisely why you should." The answer made no sense. "You think I should use it more?" "No. I think you should finally notice who is making the decision." They began walking through the park. Neither seemed in a hurry. As they reached a busy street, Nietzsche stopped beside a crowded cafe. "Let's watch." Inside, nearly every table was occupied. A young couple sat together by the window. Neither spoke. Both slowly scrolled through different videos. At another table, a father was eating lunch with his daughter. She excitedly pointed toward a bird outside. He nodded without looking up from his phone. Across the room, for university students laughed together. Every few moments, one of them disappeared into another screen. The conversations never completely stopped, but neither did the interruptions. The young man watched quietly. "I've never noticed this before." Nietzsche looked toward the cafe. "Because you were busy doing the same thing." They continued walking. A subway train arrived. Passengers stepped inside, almost as if following a silent command. Dozens of people reached into their pockets at nearly the same moment. The train moved, heads lowered. The city disappeared behind glowing screens. The philosopher spoke softly. "People believe attention is something they own." He paused. "But attention is also something that can be taken." The young man frowned. "Taken by who?" Nietzsche looked at him. "Anyone who learns that your next glance can be bought." The words echoed in his mind. He suddenly remembered his own morning. One notification became 5 minutes. 5 minutes became 20. 20 became another lost evening. Not because he chose it, because he never questioned it. They stopped at a small pedestrian crossing. The light turned red. Everyone waited. Within seconds, nearly every person standing there unlocked a phone. One man checked sports scores. Another opened social media. A teenager refreshed short videos. An elderly woman read headlines. The crossing lasted less than 40 seconds. Even that felt too long for silence. Nietzsche quietly asked, "Do you know what frightens people most today?" The young man expected a complicated answer. Instead, Nietzsche simply said, "Being alone with their own thoughts." The traffic light turned green. Nobody responded. Everyone continued walking, eyes still fixed downward. As darkness settled over the city, they entered a quiet bookstore tucked between two cafes. It was almost empty. No music, no television, only the sound of pages turning. The young man instinctively reached for his phone, then stopped. He smiled. "I almost did it again." Nietzsche nodded. "Habits are patient. They do not disappear because you notice them once." The young man slipped the phone deeper into his pocket. For the first time that day, he looked around instead. Shelves, books, people reading quietly. He realized how much of the world he usually walked past without seeing. Not because it wasn't interesting, because his attention had already been promised somewhere else. As they prepared to leave the bookstore, the young man finally asked, "So what do I do?" Nietzsche looked toward the city outside. Its streets still glowed with thousands of tiny screens. Then he answered, Protect your attention the way ancient kings protected their kingdoms. The young man listened carefully. Nietzsche continued, because whatever commands your attention slowly begins to command your life. Silence followed. The words felt heavier than anything the young man had heard all day. For the first time, he understood that the problem had never been the phone itself. The problem was that he had stopped deciding when it deserved his attention. And somewhere between the endless notifications, he had quietly surrendered the one thing that had always been entirely his own. Monday morning arrived. The alarm rang at exactly the same time. The room looked exactly the same. His phone rested on the bedside table, exactly where he had left it the night before. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The screen lit up. 3 new messages, 2 emails, several notifications. For a brief moment, his hand reached toward the phone. Then it stopped, not because the phone had become less tempting, because for the first time, he noticed a choice. Instead of unlocking the screen, he stood up. He walked to the window. The city was only beginning to wake. Morning sunlight reflected from the rooftops. A delivery truck rolled slowly down the empty street. Someone walked a dog across the park. Birds gathered along the power lines. He couldn't remember the last time he had actually watched the morning begin. Normally, he would have already been somewhere else, scrolling through other people's lives before living his own. He smiled quietly. The phone could wait. During breakfast, he left it on the kitchen counter. The silence felt unfamiliar. His mind kept inventing reasons to check it. Maybe someone needs you. Maybe you've missed something important. Just one quick look. He poured another cup of coffee. The thoughts gradually became quieter. Later that morning, he boarded the subway. The train was full. Almost every passenger stared into a glowing screen. Heads lowered, earphones in, thumbs moving endlessly. For months, he had looked exactly the same. Today, he slipped his phone into his backpack before sitting down. Instead, he watched the city pass beyond the window. Children waiting for school buses. An elderly man reading a newspaper. Street musicians preparing their instruments. Rainwater still shining on the sidewalk from the night before. The journey felt strangely longer. Not because time had slowed, because he was finally present for it. At the office, the habit returned. While working on an important report, his phone vibrated. His eyes immediately moved toward it. His hand followed. Then he stopped. He asked himself a question he had never asked before. Does this deserve my attention right now? The answer was simple. No. He turned the phone face down, finished the report. Only afterward did he read the message. Nothing had been urgent. Nothing had been lost, except the interruption he had almost invited. That evening, he returned to the same park. The lake reflected the colors of the setting sun. The bench where he had first met Nietzsche remained empty, or so he thought. A familiar voice spoke behind him. So, the young man turned. Friedrich Nietzsche stood quietly beneath the trees. Who decided where your attention went today? The young man looked at the phone, resting silently in his pocket, then looked back at the lake. I did. Nietzsche nodded. For how long? The young man laughed softly. Not perfectly, but longer than yesterday. The philosopher smiled. That is how freedom begins. They stood together without speaking. The city continued buzzing in the distance. Cars passed. Notifications echoed faintly from people walking nearby. Screens continued glowing across the park. Nothing about the world had changed. It was still designed to compete for every second of attention. But something inside the young man had changed. He no longer believed every vibration deserved an answer. He no longer mistook constant stimulation for meaningful living. He had discovered that attention was not something to spend carelessly. It was something to protect. Nietzsche adjusted his coat and began walking toward the park exit. Just before disappearing into the evening light, he stopped one final time. Without turning around, he said, most people believe freedom means doing whatever they want. He paused. Real freedom begins the moment you decide what is no longer allowed to control your mind. The philosopher disappeared among the trees. The young man remained beside the lake. He reached into his pocket and held the phone for a moment. Then, without unlocking it, he slipped it back inside. The sunset continued painting the water in shades of gold. For the first time in years, he experienced an entire moment without trying to escape it, and he realized something quietly profound. The greatest distraction had never been the phone. It had been forgetting that his attention was his life. And every moment he chose where to place it, he was choosing who he was becoming.